Well, for us political nerds, November Tynwald was a quite special, as much for what wasn't being said in public as for what was. There were lots and lots of interesting debates and discussions. There was, behind closed doors, of course, the lots of discussion going on as to who would be the new minister. And Chief Minister Alf Cannon was being suitably discreet at the fact that he was building a new ministerial team, and of course the new ministerial team was announced the following week after the November Tynwald. But to start with, there were a range of questions on tuition fees and discussions about the Manx Care Board, and Jason Moorhouse was particularly interested about the what appeared to be a public rift between Manx Care's position and the position that the Chief Minister was adopting, particularly in relation to the potential cuts in services that were being suggested. So that was that. Laurie Hooper had some questions in relation to housing, and the answer that the DOI Minister gave upset or concerned Laurie Hooper, in that he was asking about how many public sector houses, new public sector houses, had been built, as opposed to refurbishments or rebuilds of existing properties. And the answer the DOI Minister gave was, well, actually, there haven't been any new houses. So there are houses that are new, but they aren't additional houses. Perhaps that's the better way of putting it. So that we have the same number of public sector houses after 3 years of this administration. And bearing in mind the housing crisis that everyone standing for election was talking about, you might have thought there would have been a few more houses than that. So then we move on to the main order paper. Lots of issues there. The Minister for Infrastructure made a statement on the Select Committee report on poverty, on housing and homelessness, and the Minister of Environment, Food and Agriculture gave quite a lengthy statement on food hygiene assurance, and possibly she was right to do so, because she hardly had any queries or questions raised as a result of giving a very, very detailed statement. Then we moved on to possibly the biggest issue that Tynwald has debated, certainly this year, which is the Manx National Insurance Fund, addressing the long-term sustainability of the island's social security benefits and national insurance scheme. And this is quite a big issue for various, 2016, a report was produced which showed very clearly that the National Insurance Fund was going to run out, and urgent steps were required. Some steps were taken in 2016, probably not enough, and I say that as one of the ministers who was involved in that discussion. But subsequently, certainly the 5 years of the Quayle administration, there doesn't appear to have been a lot done in relation to the National Insurance Fund. And 3 years into the Cannon administration, Alex Allinson comes forward with a conversation about the future of the fund. And the reason, of course, for all of this is the strong recommendation of the actuaries that have produced the various reports, or the indication, the direction of travel seems to be, if you want to have your fund preserved and secure into the future, you really do have to think about doing something like removing the triple lock pension promise. And that is going to be a difficult thing to do, particularly as we get closer to the general election. It is fair to say that, Laurie Hooper included an amendment which was looking to support the 4 principles outlined in the document. Bearing in mind this was a Council of Ministers document, Laurie Hooper was surprised that the Council of Ministers didn't back that and didn't support him in supporting the 4 principles outlined in the document. The reasons, of course, given by Alex Allinson were, well, actually, you know what, this is a conversation. It's down for a general debate, not down as it's not a general debate, but there was no recommendations. It was merely to receive the report. And that was supported generally by Tynwald, but Laurie Hooper's amendment, only 5 voted in favour of that. Then we moved on to the energy strategy, the agriculture strategy, and food security plan, and those items received a fair amount of debate. Some members commenting that perhaps there was a difference in interpretation between what the energy strategy said and what the MUA were actually saying in terms of achievability of some of the renewable energy projects. Yes, an interesting debate. And again, agriculture and food security, those matters, again, quite a good debate. Some raised the point that farmers would probably welcome many of the words, but they're looking for a little bit more than warm words at the moment. They're actually looking for some funding to back this up, and of course the Minister is trying to deliver some fairly big policies in existing budgets. Then we got on to the Department of Education, Sport and Culture's departmental plan, which had a lot of fairly critical comment. And bearing in mind this was Daphne Kane's first opportunity as Education Minister to move the plan, it's fair to say members weren't giving her an easy ride by any means, but the plan ultimately was supported. Similarly, Isle of Man Post Office plan that was put forward by Stu Peters, not so much criticism there, because I think Stu Peters had lots of questions on this, so members had already vented their respective spleens in relation to the post office and any concerns they might have. There was then the report on policy principles to inform the Isle of Man's approach to tackling harm caused by drugs. The biggest criticism of this was, well, actually, we're 3 years into this administration and you're just talking about principled policies to inform the approach. Shouldn't you really be getting a bit further down the track than that and actually getting your approach into black and white and getting on with taking that approach rather than just informing your approach? Well, the Minister's response to that was, these are quite difficult things that we have to accept. So, that we are accepting principles which recognise that, drugs exist in society. They're not talking about legalising, but they are talking about perhaps less vigorous pursuit of people who have, for various reasons, become addicted to drugs and end up often in Victoria Road. I think it's not Victoria Road now, it's Derby, in the prison. Something like a third of prisoners in Derby are there for drugs-related matters. Now, some of them will always end up in prison, and I don't think that's going to change. But I think there was a recognition in the report that maybe too many people are getting jailed for relatively minor drugs matters. Then we moved on to the Manx Care annual report, and some members were concerned that the Chief Minister had asked that Tynwald notes that work is currently underway to align the mandate to Manx Care, the Manx Care operating plan and the budget. And members were saying, but surely the budget must follow the Manx Care operating plan. That was the most important thing, was the operating plan. But, of course, you can't spend money that you haven't got, and we are getting to the situation where there is going to be much less flexibility in terms of what reserves are left to spend. Ultimately, the Keys and Legco supported the motion, but there were some attempts at amendment. I think what was it? Amendment. I've written down the votes, but I haven't actually written down what they what they were voting for. So apologies for that. Isle of Man War Pensions Committee, a person was appointed to that. Then we got on to, again, a pretty weighty item, the Constitutional and Legal Affairs and Justice Committee, and that's hard enough to say in itself. First report for the session, the Constitution of the Isle of Man, internal self-government and external self-determination. And some very interesting recommendations in here, some relatively modest, some you would think would be relatively simple, like Tynwald is of the opinion that the word dependency does not reflect clearly the constitutional status of the Isle of Man, which it doesn't. But you try finding a term that everyone's prepared to agree with, bearing in mind as well you have to get Jersey and Guernsey to agree as well, because it's their crown dependencies too. But yes, some very weighty matters in there, and if you look out in a week or so's time, you'll see a podcast on that. Perspective is going to be covering that shortly. Also, the Constitutional Legal Affairs Committee were recommending a judicial officer should be appointed as a permanent chair of the Employment and Equality Tribunal. Well, Council of Ministers weren't having that. They wanted to go a lot further and look at all the various tribunals that exist. So they amended it to include a much broader consideration of the various tribunals. Rob Collister was successful with his dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia and dysgraphia petition for redress. He managed to get that through, and a committee was formed. The hydrocarbon resources and film funding items from Mr. Thomas and Mr. Ashford were delayed for a further month, and the government conference, the general debate put down by Mr. Glover, was interesting. This was a general debate about the item at the government conference relating to public service, and yes, there were some very interesting comments there, well worth listening to if you get a chance. And I'm sure Andy Ralphs, the Chief Executive Officer of Isle of Man Government, will have listened carefully and hopefully will have picked up some ideas. And then finally we got to the orders, and this was on day 3. Yes, day 3. We were well into the afternoon on day 3 before we got to the orders. There were 5 orders, I think. Yes, 5 orders at the end of the order paper, and those included airports and civil aviation, related matters, an animal health matter from the obviously from DEFA, and 2 income tax measures that I'm hoping to catch up with Alex Allenson and get a bit more detail on in possibly a future agenda. So that was what was going on front of house, so to speak, in Tynwald, but behind the scenes there was an awful lot of speculation about the new ministers, and I think I spoke to probably a dozen of the Keys members, all of whom denied that they were that they'd even been offered a role, let alone that they were prepared to accept a role in Council of Ministers. But ultimately, possibly, I forget which of the apostles it was that denied Christ 3 times before the crucifixion. It felt a little bit like that in Tynwald with people. Oh no, I wouldn't want to be part of Council of Ministers. And ultimately, a new team was formed within a relatively short time of Tynwald finishing its business. Just 3. How many days? Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yes, 3 days later, the announcement was made. So that was Tynwald in brief. Well, maybe not so brief, but as brief as I could manage, bearing in mind we did go into 3 whole days.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Manx Radio Newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.